that question from the one that asked, like, what has happened over time? We don't seem to see young, vibrant names that are fighting for the good of the people. What did you say to us?
Well, if you are looking for a rejuvenation of the struggle for democracy, the first place you should look at it is in the mirror. If in the past you had people you looked at, listened to, watched and admired and approved of what they were doing, don't now, so many years later, be perplexed. Some have died, some have cooled down. The situation has maybe even your silence has disappointed them and incapacitated them. So we ourselves should look in the mirror. Let us be the change we want. We are the ones that are awaited. If there were young people in the past who did certain things and you are young now, you should ask yourself, why are you not like those young people? Not why have those who were young people in 50, 60 years ago no longer acting like young people? In terms of youth, I would tell you that the reason why many changes are engineered by younger people is because when you are young, you are free to have audacity. You are also full of naivety where you fear very little things. You have very little stake in society. So this is your chance when you are young to really put your foot forward and not to be a spectator. That I think that is most important, that there are too many spectators. The liberation of democracy, democratic struggle, is not complete. Many efforts have been made in the past. None of them have succeeded. None of us have succeeded. So the struggle is still there. And those of you who are young are the ones now we are looking to. Not to complain that the old people have become old, but to say you are still young, so let's see your energy come into the field. Someone very specifically, as you say, that in 1991 there were dynamic people like Aka who inspired them. And my answer was that if for 1 minute in my life, in the past, I had inspired you, this is your chance now to be the Aka you had admired, not to look for the old Aka, to be the young Aka.
Thank you so much.
Personalities and parties from government institutions. The point that was made, the government must be for everybody and must wait for everybody. Because that is not the case, even when you have a good law, it does not seem to really make sense. In other words, even if today it's okay, the president shouldn't choose, maybe the chief justice should choose. If the personalities haven't changed, and if the characters haven't changed, you may not solve that problem. Because you elect MPs to check the executive. Now, if for some other reasons they don't do that job, it is not the fact that the law says they should check that is wrong. What is wrong is that they are not checking. Of which also goes to us as voters. That you see, if we are voting MPs who are not able to check, if we are voting for MPs who are not able to check the executive, we can't then be surprised if the checking doesn't take place. At both ends of the process, because the judgment in the Mulundika case did, on one hand, say that requiring citizens to find a permit was a violation of the constitutional rights to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and so on, which I think was correct. But the second part was that it dismissed the claim by the the petitioners against discrimination, that why should ordinary citizens be required to get permission, and I would say even to do anything which other citizens are not required simply because they are president, because they are this and this. Now, what is being proposed in the new reform is to add to the list of the special ones who are exempt. What she's raising is that discrimination is discrimination. That you are not, if our contestation is that people should not be discriminated against, you are not actually answering our grievances. If you increase the lists, in fact, you are probably making it worse. Okay? I think that is the point that she's raising.
The second question was going to say, if we are allowed to increase the list, who should be left out?
She has put it exactly that. But I think, can we think outside the box?
Yes. And I think
really, what would be wrong for the president, to also either enjoy freedom
like everybody else,
or also seek a permission or seek notice.
like everybody else.
One, he's unlikely to have his notice rejected. So really, to be just almost a courtesy to the citizens. You know, I once was in Botswana, and because Botswana has a little different culture from ours, that we were going for a lunch break from a meeting with the president and the vice president, then Mhai and Serese, Ian Kama. And when they called for lunch, they only said the former president, who was an elder, Mhai, they'll come and save him. The current president and his vice president were supposed to line up, and they lined up. And the first formation, the president was in front. He was put in front. Then he received a phone call and left the line and went and answered the call. When he came back, he joined the line at the end with this vice president in front and a lot of other people in front. Only non-Botswanas were uncomfortable. The Swanas had no problems. So that it is possible to have a society where specialness does not have to be legislated.
loud and clear. Specialness
I think I
should
need
not
to
be.
personally on that one. To me,
Okay, Nitumeza Ulunina. First of all, I must congratulate the participants for participating with vigor. I'll just say that on the positive side, as I said, I think earlier, I think that the format of this document, where you put side by side the present Public Order Act, and then the other column, the proposal, so that people can see what is being proposed to change. I think that that approach should be taken up on the fundamental issues, which include the Constitution. We need to be able to have the Independence Dispensation Constitution, the Independence Constitution. People should be very clear what was in that Constitution which created Zambia. How was it created? And then we must, every word, every line that has been changed from that should be interrogated to find out whether the changes that were made were for personal businesses, for partisan interests, or whether they were progressive or not. If they are found wanting, they must be declared null and void. So we must first erase from all this molestation of the Constitution, and get the clean slate. And then they will be challenged now how to improve. That is my bottom line message. My other concern is young people. I'm glad that the participation here has been very vigorously from young people and a few old people. I'm concerned about these people we call cadres. You know, in the French language, cadre in political language and revolutionary is a very positive word. It's a sign of commitment and so on, and partisanship. Ideological grounding, you know, the forefront of your party. But it has obviously now not become such a positive word. And the areas which I would like us to look at, and which I ask all political leaders to look at, as far as the cadres are concerned. In case of Zambia, let me tell you who the young people were during the freedom struggle. The cadres, the young cadres, were the Rupia Bandas, were the Venon Mwangas, were the Chikwandas, but they were sent to school. They were not sent to bars. So that when they came back from school, they found that they could continue with their mission. Now, the present day leaders are challenged. What are you doing to these young people? Apart from taking them to streets, apart from getting them to drink, apart from getting them to fight, what is about their futures, if they are truly the future leaders? The other aspect which is related to that is the dress code, which has been mentioned. All this pseudo-militaristic stuff. Why should you be roughly dressed as if you are going to war, when politics is supposed to be a civil aspect? And all our political leaders who allow this thing are pushing to violence. Because if you dress a certain way, if you are dressed in a suit, it's very difficult to agree to go to a fight in the mud. But if you are already dressed like a thug, you are dressed like a military person, then you are ready for war. That is very bad. And that should be looked at. And that is what brings some behavior. So that is a challenge to our leaders. The third point is that all behavior is caused. And we must always keep digging for the causes of behavior in order to correct them. And it was mentioned yesterday that about the Munyama report. As I indicated, this should have been our baseline study, which reviews what had gone bad in the past. As I say, I'm not sure whether it has ever been published. I think it has never been published, but there's need to publish it because it looked on what went wrong. In order for us to correct, we have to correct. I think it's supposed to have a full list of all the people who were detained politically, tortured, who disappeared during that era. We can't go forward without knowing that knowledge. Then I mentioned this morning the Judge Bobby Walia's judgment in 1990 about freedom of assembly. This also needs to be exposed, because the bottom line of that judgment is that citizens have a right of assembly and have a right of freedom of assembly, even if they are not a registered organization. That is the bottom line of that judgment. And I think if there is any reform on the Public Order Act, it must recapture that spirit. In the same way that it needs to recapture the spirit of the judgment on the Mrundika case, which again asserted that citizens in a free country, in a democratic country, do not need a permission from other citizens in order to exercise their freedom. That is a very critical position. Fourthly, we've talked about security, that the police are about law and order, the state needs law and order, there's no country without a law and order. The truth is that there cannot be law and order without justice. So if you want to reinforce law and order, check out whether the law itself is just to everybody. Also related to that is that freedom and human rights are indivisible. When we had the heated debate on the treatment of members of the press on all sides, the mistreatment of them, what came to mind and what became very clear is that we are forgetting that for you to be a Democrat, you must not just exercise your own freedom, you must fight and stand up for the freedom of everybody else, including the minorities and including those who don't agree with you. So whether you are the ruling party, if the opposition party is being harassed, stand on the principle that nobody should be harassed, whether you agree with them or not. So that whether it's the state media or the public media or the private media which is being mistreated, those who want a future in which they are not mistreated must stand up for those who are being mistreated. If you want non-violence in our politics, you must condemn all violence, even if it is being perpetuated by people you are associated with, so that then you buy your credibility. The other point which was pointed out, as I keep indicating, that to correct all this situation, we must start by looking in the mirrors. And very few of us, perhaps none of us, will find a clean image in that mirror, so that our responsibility to clean up our images starts with ourselves. The interesting thing about the Mulundika case is that it was the petitioners were unique, who held this country under a state of emergency for 20 years.
For 30 years, actually.
And who perpetuated the Colonial Public Order Act for a very long time.
Throughout their rule.
But once they were in opposition, they became the champions of freedom. Freedom they had suppressed. Then those of us who wanted them changed, because we told the country that these were so badly behaved that they were dictators.
Undemocratic.
As MMD, we took over from them. Mr. Chiluba even reintroduced the state of emergency. I'm very proud that I was a minority members of the ruling party who opposed that even when I was in cabinet until I resigned, because we were reversing what we promised. And I'm not saying that to praise myself, but I'm saying that because a young man said there used to be an acre he admired, and I challenged him that he must become that acre. Perhaps this other acre has become old. But that acre should be reborn in somebody else. So that you can see that the history of Zambia is that UNIP was oppressive, and it only realized how bad oppression is when it was in opposition. MMD was a champion of ending oppression. Once they were in a seat to end it, they perpetuated it. PF was a very big champion against the Public Order Act. When it went into power, suddenly it said you cannot have a society without a Public Order Act. Now, are there any other potential betrayers who today are pretending, who today may be pretending to be championing the cause of freedom, the way UNIP championed the form of independence and freedom, the way MMD championed democracy and development, the way PF championed against the Public Order Act. How do we make sure that we do not continue this culture? We can only do that if the freedom we fight for is the freedom for everybody. We can only do that if the democracy we fight for, the justice we fight for, is the justice for everybody, including those we don't agree with. And the time to show that if you go into power next, you'll be different, is now before you are in power. Let's hear you, even if you are opposition. If injustice is being done by somebody in the ruling party, let's hear you stand up. If injustice is being done by your fellow party members, let's hear you stand up. So that you can be partisan, but in the context of being a nationalist.
This statement was made in 2020, early 2020.